Night has settled over the ancient city, and the last warmth of the day is slowly leaving the stone beneath you. Somewhere beyond these quiet walls, Rome is still awake in small, distant ways. A footstep passes, a door closes, a voice fades along a narrow street. But here, for this little while, there is nothing you need to follow. Imagine setting down the modern world beside you. The messages can wait. The unfinished work can remain unfinished. The plans for tomorrow do not need your attention yet. Even the things that have been circling through your mind all day can become quieter when you stop asking them to reach an answer. The Romans knew something about this. Although their lives were far less comfortable than ours, they lived with discomfort that modern life often keeps at a distance. Heat could linger in a room. Winter cold could enter through imperfect walls. Streets could be noisy. Water, food, travel, illness, and safety could all carry uncertainties that were simply part of ordinary existence. And yet, beneath all those difficulties, there was still the same human mind. A mind that could worry about tomorrow. A mind that could replay an insult from earlier in the day. A mind that could imagine something going wrong before it happened. A mind that could lie awake even when the body was exhausted. Perhaps that is one of the gentlest things to remember tonight. The world changes its clothing, but the human heart remains remarkably familiar. 2,000 years ago, someone could have looked into the darkness and wondered whether tomorrow would be difficult. Someone could have regretted a conversation. Someone could have wished circumstances were different. And tonight, you do not have to become that ancient person. You only have to notice the distance between your world and theirs. You have shelter. You have a bed beneath you. There is no need to stand watch over an ancient road. No need to listen for approaching wheels. No need to prepare yourself for the demands of a Roman morning. There is something almost humorous about imagining yourself dropped into ancient Rome for a single, ordinary day. The sun would rise, the streets would become busy, and very quickly you might begin looking for the nearest familiar convenience. You might wonder where the quiet room is, where the easy water is, where the comfortable chair is, where the simple certainty of modern life has gone. Before you settle any deeper into the quiet, you might leave a small trace of your own place in this shared night, simply by mentioning what time it is where you are and the part of the world from which you are listening. Somewhere, someone else may be awake beneath another sky, also allowing the day to become a little more distant. Then let that thought disappear again. There is no need to hold on to it. The Roman streets are quieting. The air feels cooler now. The stone beneath your imagined resting place has lost the heat it carried from the afternoon. And the city seems less like a powerful empire and more like a collection of ordinary people finally becoming tired. This is where the Stoic idea begins to feel less like philosophy and more like mercy. You cannot command the world to become convenient. You cannot arrange every person according to your wishes. You cannot prevent every unpleasant event. You cannot make tomorrow reveal itself before it arrives. There are simply things that belong to your hands, and things that never did. For a person living in Rome, this distinction could be very practical. A journey might be delayed. A crop might fail. A messenger might arrive late. Someone might speak unfairly. The weather might change. A plan might collapse for reasons nobody could have predicted. The world would continue making its own decisions. And perhaps the strange relief is that your world still does this. Your circumstances may be different, but the basic invitation remains. Not everything that happens around you needs to become something you carry inside yourself. Some things can remain outside. Some questions can remain unanswered. Some events can simply be allowed to exist without demanding an immediate emotional response. You may notice how often the mind tries to negotiate with reality. If only that conversation had gone differently. If only tomorrow were guaranteed. If only that person understood. If only the past could be adjusted by one small movement of thought. But tonight, none of those negotiations have to continue. The ancient Stoics were not protected from difficulty. That is part of what makes their calm so interesting. Their philosophy did not promise a world without discomfort. It suggested something quieter. That peace could sometimes come from no longer requiring the world to behave differently before you allowed yourself to rest. So for now, the ancient city can remain outside. The market can wait for morning. The roads can remain empty. The lamps can burn without your supervision. Whatever Rome is doing tonight, it does not need you. And whatever your own world is doing, it can also continue for a few hours without your constant attention. You have already carried enough of the day into this room. You do not need to carry every unfinished thought with you any farther. Let some of them remain where they appeared. Let some questions remain open. Let tomorrow keep its own mysteries. The night is not asking you to solve anything. And as the imagined streets become quieter, perhaps you can simply rest with one small understanding. You would not have survived a day in ancient Rome by controlling everything around you. Neither do you need to control everything around you tonight. The world can remain imperfect. The day can remain incomplete. You can remain here, resting, while the quiet slowly becomes enough. The morning in ancient Rome would arrive differently from the morning you know. There would be no soft glow from a screen beside the bed, no quiet mechanical hum from a cooling room, and no familiar collection of small conveniences waiting within reach. Light would simply enter through an opening in the wall, and the day would begin because the world outside had begun. Perhaps the first thing you would notice would be the temperature. It might be warmer than you wanted, or cooler than you expected. The room might carry the smell of smoke from somewhere nearby. Voices could already be moving through the streets. Animals, carts, footsteps, vendors, neighbors, workers, all gradually adding themselves to the sound of morning. You might find yourself missing silence almost immediately. Modern life gives you an extraordinary number of ways to soften the edges of existence. You can close a window, adjust the temperature, turn on a light, heat water, order food, send a message across an ocean, look something up within seconds. If you are uncomfortable, there is often another small decision waiting that can make the discomfort disappear. A Roman could not expect the same. And that difference is worth noticing without turning it into a lesson. You do not need to become tougher. You do not need to reject comfort. You do not need to imagine that hardship is secretly better than ease. Comfort is a kindness, and tonight you are allowed to enjoy it. The point is simply that human beings once lived with a much narrower circle of convenience, and somehow they still laughed, worried, loved, argued, slept, woke, and wondered about the future. The ancient world did not wait for everything to be comfortable before people continued living. There were hard floors and crowded streets. There were long walks. There were moments when a person had to wait because there was no faster way. There were evenings when darkness arrived and the day truly became dark. There was no instant escape into endless entertainment whenever the mind became restless. That last difference may be especially strange to imagine. If a Roman felt bored, there was no glowing rectangle waiting to absorb the next hour. If a Roman became anxious, there was no endless stream of information available to feed the anxiety. If someone felt uncertain about what others were doing, there was no distant social world constantly presenting itself for comparison. The mind still had worries, of course, but it had fewer doors through which new worries could enter. Tonight, you can let those doors close for a while. There is nothing wrong with being curious about the world. There is nothing wrong with knowing what is happening. But the mind does not need to remain connected to everything at all times. Even a modern person can occasionally experience the ancient luxury of not knowing. You do not need to know what everyone is doing. You do not need to know what tomorrow will bring. You do not need to know whether every unfinished matter will turn out well. For a few quiet hours, uncertainty can simply be uncertainty. Imagine walking through a Roman street after sunset. The stone beneath your feet is uneven. The buildings rise close together. Warm light escapes from small openings. Somewhere nearby, water moves through a fountain. The city is still alive, but its intensity has softened. You pass people carrying the final concerns of their day. Someone is thinking about money. Someone is thinking about family. Someone is replaying a conversation. Someone is worried about an obligation waiting in the morning. You recognize them immediately, not because you know their names, but because you know the shape of the human mind. The centuries disappear for a moment. The clothing changes. The language changes. The buildings change. But the quiet tension inside a person remains familiar. The desire for tomorrow to go well. The wish that other people would behave differently. The hope that nothing unexpected will happen. And this is where the ancient Stoic attitude begins to feel almost tender. A person does not need to demand a perfect world before becoming peaceful. There may be noise outside. There may be discomfort. There may be uncertainty. There may be things you would prefer to change. Still, the mind can learn not to add a second layer of suffering to every inconvenience. A cold room is one thing. Becoming angry that the room is cold is another. A delayed journey is one thing. Spending the entire delay imagining how unfair life is can become another burden. Someone's opinion is one thing. Building your entire sense of worth around that opinion creates another weight. The Stoics were interested in this space between what happens and how the mind responds. Not because human beings could become perfectly calm, but because there was freedom in noticing that the first event did not always have to determine the second. Tonight, you can let that distinction remain very small. You do not have to practice it perfectly. You do not have to examine every thought. You can simply notice that some discomfort is already passing on its own. The room around you is not asking you to fix it. The darkness does not need improvement. The quiet does not need explanation. Even the thoughts that remain awake inside you do not have to be chased away. They can be there without becoming your task. In ancient Rome, night eventually took the streets back from the day. Activity became smaller. Voices became fewer. Doors closed. Lamps burned lower. People who had spent hours responding to the world finally reached the private boundary of their own rooms. And perhaps that boundary still exists for you. The day has asked for your attention. You gave it what you could. Now there can be a little less. One thought can remain unfinished. One concern can remain unanswered. One expectation can loosen. The world outside can keep moving through its own complicated rhythm, while you remain somewhere quieter, surrounded by comforts that an ancient traveler might have considered extraordinary. Warmth, a place to lie down, a little darkness, a little silence, and enough time to do nothing at all. You do not need to earn the comfort of this moment. You do not need to justify resting inside it. You can simply receive it. The ancient city can fade farther into the distance now. Its streets can become softer. Its sounds can become less distinct. And the modern world, with all its conveniences and demands, can become quiet as well. For this moment, there is nowhere else you need to be. The night has moved deeper now, and the ancient city seems less like a place you are visiting and more like a quiet thought at the edge of sleep. Earlier, you noticed its discomforts. Now you can leave those details behind. What matters is the strange freedom hidden in a life where so much remained beyond personal command. A Roman could prepare carefully and still meet a different result. A journey could begin under a clear sky and end beneath rain. A letter could take longer than expected. A promise could be broken. A neighbor could be unreasonable. A body could become tired without asking permission. The world did not consult anyone before changing. This is one reason the old Stoic distinction between what belongs to us and what does not can feel so gentle at night. It does not ask you to become powerful enough to control everything. It asks something much smaller. Notice where your hands actually reach, and allow the rest of the world to remain the world. You can choose an intention. You can choose how carefully you speak. You can choose whether to answer an insult with another insult. You can choose whether to spend the evening rehearsing tomorrow's problems. But you cannot choose another person's mood. You cannot command the weather. You cannot rewrite an event simply by thinking about it 100 more times. In the Roman world, this boundary could appear in very ordinary moments. A merchant might wait for a shipment that had not arrived. A traveler might discover that the road ahead was unsafe. A household might receive news that changed the plans of an entire week. None of these things became easier because someone demanded that reality be different. Yet there was another possibility. A person could stop spending the same inner energy on a fact that had already become a fact. That possibility matters tonight. Perhaps something from your own day did not happen as you wanted. Perhaps someone misunderstood you. Perhaps a task remained incomplete. Perhaps you made a decision and now wonder whether another choice would have been better. The mind often returns to these places because it believes another visit might finally produce control. But sometimes another visit produces only another tired mind. The Stoic response was not to pretend that disappointment felt pleasant. It was to separate the event from the endless struggle against the event. What happened may still be unfortunate. It may still matter. You do not have to call it good. You only have to stop requiring yourself to change what has already happened before you are allowed to rest. Imagine a Roman sitting alone after a difficult day. There is no grand speech, no audience, no need to perform wisdom. Perhaps there is only a worn bench, a quiet wall, and the faint sound of someone walking home. The person remembers what happened and feels the familiar pull to argue with it internally. Then, little by little, the argument loses its purpose. The past does not become different. The unanswered question does not suddenly receive an answer. The difficult person does not appear and apologize. The lost opportunity does not return. What changes is much quieter. The mind stops demanding that the present repair the past. There is a kind of rest in that. You may have your own version of the same struggle. You may carry conversations long after they have ended, searching for the perfect sentence you should have spoken. You may replay a decision, imagining another version of yourself making a better choice. You may look toward tomorrow and try to prepare emotionally for every possible outcome. But preparation has a boundary. Beyond that boundary, thinking becomes another form of waiting. And tonight, you do not need to wait for certainty. You can let tomorrow remain unopened. The ancient Stoic would have understood that uncertainty was not a temporary malfunction in life. It was part of life itself. Ships depended on weather. Travelers depended on roads. Families depended on circumstances they could not predict. Fortune could turn without warning. Still, people woke, worked, shared meals, walked home, and slept. They did not need complete knowledge to continue living. Neither do you. There may be questions that your mind has not settled because they are not ready to be settled. There may be answers that belong to another morning. There may be decisions that will become clearer only after you have slept. Rest does not mean abandoning those matters. It simply means refusing to spend tonight pretending that exhaustion will solve them. Outside the imagined room, Rome is becoming quieter. The last movement in the street feels farther away. Somewhere, a gate closes. Somewhere else, footsteps disappear round a corner. The city does not become perfectly safe or perfectly controlled. It simply becomes night, and you can allow your own life to become night for a while. Not every thought deserves a response. Not every feeling requires interpretation. Not every uncertainty needs a plan. Some things can remain exactly where they are. This does not make you careless. It makes room for you to be human without demanding constant mastery over your circumstances. The old philosophy becomes almost weightless here. It is no longer a lesson about controlling the mind. It is simply a quiet reminder that your mind does not have to supervise the universe. The world has been turning without your supervision for a very long time. Tonight, it can continue. Let other people have their opinions. Let distant events remain distant. Let tomorrow hold its own possibilities. Let the past keep its own shape. You can meet what belongs to you when it arrives, and for now, there is no need to reach beyond this moment. The distinction becomes softer as the night deepens. What is yours can stay close. What is not yours can rest at a distance. You do not need to name every boundary. You do not need to examine every thought. You can simply feel the relief of not having to hold everything. And perhaps that is the quiet secret beneath the old Stoic discipline. It was never about becoming untouched by life. It was about becoming less exhausted by the impossible task of controlling it. For tonight, that is enough. The city can make its own choices. The night can make its own weather. Tomorrow can arrive in its own time, and you can remain here, no longer reaching for what cannot be reached. Morning would return to Rome whether you felt ready for it or not. The city would not pause because you had slept badly. Doors would open, voices would rise, feet would cross stone. Somewhere, work would begin before you had decided what kind of day you wanted to have. That may be one of the first things you would find difficult. Modern life gives you the impression that a day can be arranged around preference. You can choose what to watch, where to go, whom to contact, what temperature to keep the room, and when to interrupt the silence. Ancient life offered far fewer choices. Much of the day simply arrived. Imagine waking in a Roman household with no certainty that the hours ahead will resemble the ones you would choose. Perhaps there is an obligation waiting. Perhaps someone needs you. Perhaps the weather has changed. Perhaps a task that seemed simple yesterday has become complicated overnight. You would still get up. Not because everything feels right, but because life has continued. There is something quietly reassuring in that. The human being has always lived inside days that were partly chosen and partly given. Even now, despite all our technology and convenience, there are mornings that refuse to cooperate. A meeting changes. Someone calls unexpectedly. A plan disappears. The body feels tired. The mind wakes already carrying yesterday. The difference is that you may spend more time believing the day should have been different. A Roman might simply have had to accept the road. The road could be crowded. It could be uneven. It could be slow. You could dislike it, but your dislike would not shorten it. You could complain about the heat, but the sun would continue crossing the sky. You could wish someone would move faster, but their footsteps would remain their own. This is where Stoic thought can become strangely practical, not because it tells you to enjoy inconvenience, but because it asks whether resistance is helping. If the road is slow, you can spend the entire journey resenting the delay. Or you can let the delay be part of the journey without adding an extra argument to every passing minute. The event remains the same, only the burden changes. Perhaps that sounds simple. It is simple. But simple ideas can become meaningful when the mind is tired. You do not need to approve of everything that happens. You do not need to call disappointment a gift. You do not need to force yourself into gratitude whenever life becomes inconvenient. You can simply stop demanding that reality apologize for being reality. In the imagined streets, a vendor calls out somewhere ahead. A cart moves slowly over stone. A conversation rises and disappears. There is movement everywhere, but none of it is waiting for your permission. And perhaps you notice how different that feels from the modern habit of trying to control the entire emotional atmosphere of a day. We want the morning to feel productive. We want people to respond correctly. We want our plans to remain intact. We want our energy to match our schedule. We want our efforts to produce visible results. And when those things fail to happen, the mind often treats the failure as a personal disturbance. But a day is not a machine. It does not owe you perfect timing. The Romans knew this in a very physical way. A journey could take longer. A fire could burn badly. A meal could be simpler than expected. A messenger could fail to arrive. A business arrangement could change. A person could behave in a way that made no sense. The world was full of interruptions, and still evening eventually came. That is worth remembering when your own day feels unfinished. A day does not have to unfold according to plan to be over. You do not have to repair every disappointment before nightfall. Some things can simply remain unresolved. Perhaps this is why imagining ancient Rome can become unexpectedly soothing. Its limitations make something visible that modern life sometimes hides. No matter how sophisticated the world becomes, human beings still cannot arrange everything. There will always be delays. There will always be misunderstandings. There will always be moments when effort produces less than expected. There will always be things that happen without asking whether you are ready. And there will always be an evening when the day finally asks you to stop. Not because everything has been completed, simply because the day is finished. Imagine now that the Roman street is beginning to empty. The same person who hurried through it earlier is walking more slowly. The same walls that seemed ordinary in daylight have become dark shapes. The obligations of the morning have lost some of their intensity. This happens in your own life too. A problem that felt enormous at noon can feel smaller at midnight. A message that seemed urgent can look strangely ordinary a few hours later. A mistake that demanded your attention all afternoon can become something you are willing to leave alone until morning. Night changes perspective without asking permission. Perhaps you have noticed this before. Darkness does not solve your problems, but it often makes them quieter. It removes some of the sharp edges. It gives the mind fewer details to chase. And this is where the ancient Stoic spirit meets the simple human need for rest. You are not required to make every day successful. You are not required to make every interaction meaningful. You are not required to turn every inconvenience into wisdom. Sometimes a difficult day is simply a difficult day. It can end. You can stop carrying its evaluation. You can let the score disappear. There is no ancient judge waiting in the darkness to announce whether you performed well enough. The city has gone on without keeping a perfect record of every person's mistakes. Perhaps you can allow yourself the same kindness. You do not need to grade yourself tonight. You do not need to review the day one final time. You do not need to decide whether you were productive enough, patient enough, successful enough, or understood enough. The day has already become part of the past. Let it have its place there. The Roman streets continue to quiet. The sounds become fewer. The imagined footsteps no longer seem to belong to anyone in particular. There is only the feeling of distance now. Distance from the morning. Distance from the expectations. Distance from everything that demanded an answer. And somewhere in that distance is a simple freedom. The day happened. You were there. You did what you could. Now the day can belong to itself, and you can begin belonging to the quiet. There is a particular kind of quiet that arrives only after a demanding day has spent itself. The walls remain where they were. The responsibilities have not disappeared. Nothing outside has necessarily become easier. Yet the noise around them has diminished, and in that softer atmosphere, a person can finally hear what remains inside. Imagine a room somewhere in ancient Rome after midnight. The city beyond the walls is still there, but it has lost its daytime intensity. A lamp gives only enough light to reveal a small portion of the room. There are no crowds here, no voices asking for decisions, no footsteps demanding attention. And perhaps this is the sort of room where Marcus Aurelius might have found himself alone. Not as an emperor for a moment, not as a figure carved into history, but simply as a tired human being at the end of a long day. A person with responsibilities waiting for him. A person surrounded by people whose needs could not always be postponed. A person who could not control how every event unfolded simply because he carried authority. It is easy to imagine power as freedom from difficulty. But power does not make the world obedient. A person can have influence and still become tired. A person can make decisions and still face consequences they did not expect. A person can be respected and still be misunderstood. A person can be responsible for thousands and still have an ordinary human mind that becomes crowded with thoughts. Perhaps that is why the private moments matter more than the public ones. When the room becomes quiet, titles become less useful. The mind does not care much about rank when it is exhausted. It wants somewhere to rest. You may know that feeling. After a long day, there can be a strange distance between who you were during the day and who you become when everything becomes quiet. During daylight, you respond, you decide, you answer, you perform. You move from one demand to another. Then night comes. Suddenly, there is no immediate reason to continue performing. You are simply yourself. The ancient Stoics returned often to this inner space, not because they believed a person could escape life, but because they understood that an outer role could never contain the whole human being. Marcus Aurelius could be emperor in the morning. At night, he was still someone who needed rest. That simple thought can soften something inside you. You do not need to be your role every minute. You do not need to remain the responsible one after the responsibilities have ended. You do not need to continue being productive simply because you were productive earlier. You do not need to keep solving problems just because people have become accustomed to seeing you solve them. There can be a private boundary between what the day required and what the night asks. And the night asks very little. Imagine the emperor sitting quietly beside a small lamp. Perhaps there are papers nearby. Perhaps there are messages waiting. Perhaps tomorrow contains difficult decisions. None of those things need to be denied. They simply do not need to be handled at this exact moment. This is an important difference. Rest is not pretending that responsibilities do not exist. Rest is allowing them to exist without personally standing beside them every second. The problems can remain problems while you sleep. The unanswered question can remain unanswered. The future can remain uncertain. You do not have to keep watch over every possibility. Somewhere outside, a guard may still be awake. Someone may still be walking through the city. Somewhere far beyond the walls, another household may still have a lamp burning. But one person can stop, and you can stop too. The mind may resist at first. It may suggest one more thought, one more review of the day, one more imagined conversation, one more attempt to understand what someone meant. You do not have to fight those thoughts. That would simply create another task. Instead, you can let them become less important. A thought can appear without receiving a meeting. A memory can return without becoming a problem. A question can remain a question. The room does not need to change for this to happen. The lamp can continue giving its small circle of light. The walls can remain quiet. The night can remain outside. And slowly, the difference between thinking about something and needing to solve it can become clearer. This may have been one of the quiet strengths of Stoic reflection. The mind was not asked to become empty. It was asked to become less dependent on the world behaving exactly as desired. That is a gentler kind of freedom. You can care without clinging. You can act without demanding a perfect result. You can love people without controlling their choices. You can take responsibility without believing everything depends entirely on you. And perhaps, most importantly, tonight, you can rest without first making your entire life orderly. There will always be something left. There will always be another message, another decision, another morning, another responsibility waiting beyond the darkness. If you waited for the world to become completely finished before allowing yourself to rest, you would never rest. The ancient room grows quieter. The lamp seems smaller. The imagined city has almost disappeared behind the walls. You are no longer following the emperor's life. You are simply sharing the same basic human truth. There are moments when nothing more can reasonably be asked of you. Let the unfinished things remain unfinished. Let the questions stay where they are. Let tomorrow keep its distance. Tonight does not belong to your responsibilities. It belongs to the quiet space between them. Perhaps this is what makes the old philosophy feel so gentle now. Beneath all its discipline, there is a recognition that a human being cannot remain outwardly alert forever. Even an emperor needed darkness. Even an emperor needed sleep. Even a person carrying enormous responsibilities eventually had to place them beside the door and enter the quiet room alone. You can do something similar, not forever, only for tonight. The world will still be there in the morning. For now, the lamp can burn quietly, the room can become still, and you can allow yourself to become smaller than the role you carried through the day. You are not required to manage everything. You are only here, resting. There is another kind of tiredness that does not come from work, distance, or physical discomfort. It comes from other people living inside your thoughts long after they have left the room. A sentence can be spoken in a moment and remembered for hours. A glance can become a question. A criticism can become an argument that continues silently long after the person who made it has gone home. Sometimes the body is resting while the mind is still standing somewhere else, trying to explain itself. The ancient world was not free from this. In Rome, reputation mattered. People lived among neighbors, relatives, patrons, workers, officials, merchants, soldiers, and strangers. Status could shape how a person was treated. Approval could open doors. Disapproval could make ordinary life more difficult. So imagine walking through those streets, knowing that other people's opinions could affect your place in the world. You might hear someone speaking about you. You might receive praise you secretly wanted. You might receive criticism you did not deserve. You might spend the rest of the day thinking about either one. And that is where the Stoic perspective offers something quiet. Another person's judgment is an event outside you. It may have consequences. It may contain useful information. But it does not automatically become the truth about who you are. There is a difference between being seen and being defined. You can be misunderstood without becoming a misunderstanding. You can be disliked without becoming unworthy. You can be praised without becoming dependent on praise. That distinction may sound obvious when the night is quiet. During the day, it can be much harder. The human mind wants to know how it is being received. It wants reassurance. It wants to repair its reputation. It wants to understand why someone sounded distant, why someone did not respond, why someone looked disappointed. And because these questions involve other people, they rarely have clean endings. You can think for an hour and still not know what another person meant. You can replay a conversation from 10 different angles and still not enter another person's mind. You can imagine every possible explanation, but uncertainty remains. So perhaps tonight you can leave some of that uncertainty where it belongs. With them, you do not need to know exactly what another person thinks of you before you are allowed to sleep. You do not need to correct every impression. You do not need to win every invisible argument. Imagine a Roman returning home after hearing an unkind remark in the street. Perhaps the words were unfair. Perhaps they were careless. Perhaps they were simply misunderstood. He could carry those words through dinner. He could carry them into the evening. He could repeat them silently while lying down. Or, at some point, he could recognize that the speaker has gone. The conversation has ended, and the remaining pain is being kept alive by memory. The words were spoken once. The mind was repeating them. There is something gentle in noticing that difference. Not every repeated thought deserves another repetition. Sometimes the mind mistakes repetition for preparation. It thinks, if I examine this again, I may finally understand it. But some things become no clearer with another hour of thought. A person's opinion remains their opinion. A past conversation remains in the past. An awkward moment does not become more important simply because you remember it before sleep. And you do not need to turn away from people completely to understand this. The Stoic approach was not about becoming cold. It was not a permission to stop caring. It was about caring without surrendering your entire inner balance to forces you cannot command. You can be kind without needing everyone to approve. You can listen without obeying every judgment. You can accept correction without accepting shame. You can admit a mistake without turning the mistake into an identity. These are small distinctions, but they create space. And space is valuable at night. There is already enough inside your mind. You do not need to invite every opinion you have ever received to sit beside you. Let some voices become distant. The person who criticized you today has their own night. They have their own worries, their own memories, their own unfinished thoughts. They are not standing beside your bed now. They are somewhere else, living inside their own experience. You do not have to carry their emotional world with you. This is not rejection. It is simply a boundary, a quiet boundary, the kind that does not require anger, the kind that says, your thoughts may belong to you, and mine may belong to me. Imagine the ancient city again. Behind one window, someone is still talking. Behind another, someone is already asleep. In another room, a person is worrying about tomorrow. Across the street, someone may be laughing quietly with family. Thousands of private worlds exist within the same city. No single mind can enter them all. No single person can control how every other person understands them. And perhaps that is not a failure. Perhaps it is freedom. You are allowed to be misunderstood sometimes. You are allowed to disappoint someone. You are allowed to have an imperfect conversation. You are allowed to leave a sentence unfinished. You are allowed to be a human being among other human beings. The pressure to manage everyone's perception of you can become exhausting because it has no natural endpoint. There is always another opinion to consider, another reaction to anticipate, another imagined judgment to answer. But the night has an endpoint of its own. It asks you to become quieter. So let the invisible audience leave. There is no audience here. No one is grading your thoughts. No one needs a performance from you. The person you were today can simply rest. Whatever others thought, they can keep their thoughts for the night. Whatever you thought about them, you can set that down as well. The room does not need to contain those conversations. The darkness does not need to know who was right. You do not need to decide. And perhaps this is another form of Stoic freedom, one that becomes easier to feel than to explain. Other people may speak, other people may judge, other people may misunderstand. You can still return to yourself, not to a perfect version of yourself, not to a defended version, just to yourself, quiet, unperformed, unobserved. As the imagined Roman streets become stiller, the voices begin to lose their words. You no longer need to know what they were saying. They can become part of the distant city, and you can remain here, beyond their reach, with nothing to prove before sleep. There is a particular kind of tiredness that arrives when the mind keeps trying to repair something that has already happened. The day may have contained only one small disappointment. A plan changed. A conversation felt different from what you expected. Something you worked for did not happen. Perhaps you made a choice that, in the quiet of evening, you wish you could reconsider. The event may be over, but the mind can keep returning. It can walk back through the same moment and search for the place where everything might have changed. It can imagine a different sentence, a different decision, a different expression on someone's face. It can create another version of the day and then compare that imagined day with the one you actually lived. Ancient people knew this kind of regret too. A Roman could lose an opportunity. A negotiation could fail. A journey could turn out badly. A relationship could become strained. A decision could produce consequences nobody expected. The difference between then and now is not that ancient people were free from regret. They were not. The difference is that Stoic thought offered a way to stop treating regret as a doorway back into the past. Once the moment has passed, the mind may remember it, but memory does not give it new possibilities. This can be difficult to accept because regret feels active. It feels as though you are doing something when you analyze the past. But sometimes you are only touching an old wound to see whether it still hurts. And perhaps tonight you do not need to check. You already know that the day was imperfect. You already know there were things you could have done differently. You already know that you are not a flawless person moving through a flawless world. Nothing more needs to be proven. Imagine a Roman merchant sitting at the end of a disappointing day. The expected transaction did not happen. The money did not arrive. A useful connection was lost. He may sit beneath the quiet roof and replay every part of the encounter. At first, the thoughts seem useful. Then the same details return. Then the same questions. Why did I say that? Why did I trust them? Why did I wait? Why did I not notice? The questions begin to circle. Eventually, perhaps he realizes that there are two separate things in front of him. There is the mistake itself, and there is the punishment he keeps giving himself for having made it. The first may contain something worth learning. The second may contain nothing useful at all. This distinction is gentle enough to carry into your own night. You can learn from something without continuing to suffer through it. You can recognize an error without turning it into a sentence against yourself. You can wish you had chosen differently without requiring your mind to revisit the choice every hour. The past can teach without becoming your permanent residence. That is especially important when you are tired. Exhaustion makes old problems feel larger. The mind becomes less flexible. A small uncertainty can seem enormous. A single mistake can appear to explain an entire life. Night can exaggerate the importance of things. So perhaps the kindest response is not to believe every thought that arrives after midnight. You do not have to settle your opinion of yourself tonight. You do not have to decide whether the mistake was significant. You do not have to determine exactly what it means. Let morning have some of that work. The Stoics understood that events themselves and judgments about events are not always the same thing. Something may happen, and then the mind begins constructing a story around it. The story can become much heavier than the original event. A missed opportunity becomes evidence that you are behind. A difficult conversation becomes evidence that you are unlikable. A failure becomes evidence that you are incapable. A wrong decision becomes evidence that you cannot trust yourself. But one event does not need to become an identity. You can allow it to remain one event. This is a quiet form of mercy. A person is larger than the worst afternoon of their life, larger than one poor decision, larger than one embarrassing moment, larger than one season in which things did not go well. The ancient city knew this without needing to say it in modern language. Every street contained people whose fortunes had changed. Someone prosperous could become uncertain. Someone unknown could become important. Someone confident could become afraid. Nothing stayed fixed. And because nothing stayed fixed, no single moment had the final word. Perhaps your mind can loosen around that idea. You do not know what tomorrow will make of today. A disappointment may remain disappointing, but it does not have to become permanent. A mistake may remain a mistake, but it does not have to become a life sentence. Something may have gone wrong, and you can still sleep. That may be one of the simplest freedoms available to you. The world does not require you to finish understanding every painful event before you close your eyes. There are things that can wait. There are lessons that can wait. There are conversations that can wait. There are decisions that can wait. Even understanding yourself can wait. You are allowed to be unfinished. The thought may feel strange at first, but perhaps unfinished is simply another word for alive. No one reaches the end of an ordinary day having perfectly understood everything that happened. No one makes every choice with complete information. No one speaks every sentence exactly as they wish they had. A human life contains rough edges. The Stoic path does not require those edges to disappear. It asks whether you can stop fighting the fact that they exist. So, let the past become quieter now. Not erased, not denied, simply farther away. You do not need to walk through every old room tonight. You have already been there. The doors can remain closed. The imagined Roman city is almost silent now. The disappointment that once seemed important has lost its sharpness. There is no need to give it another argument. What happened has happened. What can be learned will become clear when it needs to. And for now, there is nothing more required. The night can hold what you cannot change. You can rest without repairing yesterday. There is a quiet moment that sometimes comes after you stop arguing with something you cannot change. Nothing outside moves. The room remains the same. The unfinished matter is still unfinished. Yet something inside becomes less crowded. It is not victory. It is not the feeling of having solved a difficult problem. It is simply the absence of one particular struggle. the struggle against what has already become true. Perhaps this is the part of Stoic thought that is easiest to misunderstand. Acceptance does not mean saying that everything is good. It does not mean pretending that disappointment is pleasant, that unfairness is fair, or that loss does not matter. It means something smaller. You stop requiring reality to become different before you allow yourself to be at peace. Imagine standing beside an old Roman road at dusk. The road stretches beyond you, marked by countless footsteps that have already disappeared. You may wish it led somewhere else. You may wish the journey had been shorter. You may wish the person traveling beside you had behaved differently. But the road does not change because you dislike its direction. At some point, you simply stand there. And the strange thing is that standing there without fighting the road requires less energy than arguing with it. This is the freedom hidden inside acceptance. You stop spending your strength on a door that will not open. You stop trying to make yesterday answer today's questions. You stop asking another person to become the person you hoped they would be. You stop demanding certainty from a future that has not arrived. And the energy that was being spent on resistance becomes available for something quieter. Rest. There is no need to make this dramatic. In fact, the quieter it becomes, the more useful it is. Perhaps there is something in your own life that you have been trying to force into resolution. It may be a relationship. It may be a decision. It may be an uncertainty about work or the future. It may be something much smaller, almost too ordinary to mention. You do not have to solve it now. You can acknowledge that it exists and still let the night remain peaceful. The ancient Stoic would not have expected the world to become cooperative simply because a person wished for it. There would always be circumstances that refused to bend. A locked gate remained locked. A delayed message remained delayed. A difficult person remained difficult. A changing season continued changing. The wisdom was not found in controlling those things. It was found in changing the relationship with them. You can stand beside an event without becoming trapped inside it. You can experience disappointment without becoming disappointment. You can experience uncertainty without becoming permanently anxious about uncertainty. You can experience a difficult day without deciding that life itself is difficult. There is space between you and what happens. Sometimes that space is very small. Sometimes it grows slowly. But once you notice it, the mind has somewhere to rest. Perhaps tonight you can imagine placing an ordinary object on a stone's surface. Not a symbol of something grand, just an object that has been in your hands all day. You set it down. There is no ceremony. You simply stop holding it. The relief comes not because the object has disappeared, but because your hand no longer has to keep its grip. Acceptance can be like that. The circumstance remains. Your relationship with it changes. And perhaps this is why the ancient philosophy does not need to be shouted. Its most useful ideas are often quiet enough to fit inside a tired mind. You do not need to become invulnerable. You do not need to stop caring. You do not need to become indifferent to people or events. You only need a little less resistance, a little less internal bargaining, a little less demand that every part of life makes sense before you can rest. The night is already demonstrating this. You cannot make it move faster. You cannot command morning to arrive at exactly the moment you choose. You cannot ask darkness to explain itself. You simply remain here while time continues. There is something peaceful about allowing time to do its work. You do not have to push the night towards sleep. Sleep does not respond well to force. It comes more naturally when nothing is being demanded. The same may be true of inner quiet. The harder you insist that your mind becomes silent, the more closely you may listen for every thought. So there is no need to make your mind silent. Let it be imperfect. Let it wander a little. Let one thought arrive and leave. Let another remain for a moment. You do not have to follow either one. The old Roman world becomes less detailed now. The road is no longer important. The buildings are darker. The last movement in the distance has almost disappeared. There is only the sense of a person no longer trying to control the entire shape of the night. And that person can be you. You can allow tomorrow to be tomorrow. You can allow other people to be other people. You can allow the past to remain past. You can allow yourself to be exactly as tired as you are. No improvement is required before rest. No emotional transformation is necessary. Nothing has to become meaningful tonight. There is a quiet dignity in letting life remain incomplete. The Romans built roads, temples, homes, and monuments. But even the strongest stone could not stop time from changing everything. A person could plan carefully, work diligently, and still discover that the world had its own direction. Perhaps peace begins when you stop taking that personally. Reality is not against you. It simply is. The night is not withholding anything from you. It is simply night. Tomorrow is not refusing to explain itself. It has not arrived. And you are not failing because you cannot control either one. You are simply human. For a moment, that can be enough. The small freedom of acceptance is not the freedom to control more. It is the freedom to stop needing control quite so much. And as that need becomes softer, there is less to hold, less to defend, less to explain, less to solve. The imagined road grows quiet beneath the fading light. You do not need to walk it tonight. You can simply leave it there. The city has grown quieter without announcing that it has done so. There is less movement now, fewer voices, fewer doors opening and closing. The urgency that belonged to the daytime has gradually dissolved into the darkness, leaving only small sounds that seem almost accidental. Somewhere in this sleeping part of Rome, there is a courtyard. It is enclosed by old stone walls. A few plants rest in the corners. The air has cooled. A narrow fountain continues its slow, ordinary movement, not because anyone is watching it, but simply because water continues to find its way through the stone. Nothing in the courtyard is trying to impress you. That may be why it feels peaceful. There are no crowds here, no speeches, no demands, no decisions waiting to be made. Only a small place that has become quiet enough to notice. Perhaps you sit for a while. There is no particular posture you need. You do not have to meditate correctly. You do not have to clear your mind. You can simply remain. The fountain makes a sound that does not require interpretation. It rises and falls in the same small pattern. The stone beneath you is cool. The air carries the faint scent of leaves and earth. And for a moment, the world becomes very simple. Stone, water, night. You, the ancient Stoics, often valued simplicity, but simplicity can be misunderstood as deprivation. It does not necessarily mean owning nothing or rejecting comfort. Sometimes simplicity is simply the absence of unnecessary demands. A room can be simple because nothing in it is asking for your attention. A moment can be simple because there is nothing you need to decide. A night can be simple because tomorrow has not arrived. Perhaps your own mind has been crowded by too many small demands. Remember this. Answer that. Check again. Plan ahead. Compare. Decide. Correct. Improve. Predict. The modern world is remarkably good at turning every quiet space into another opportunity for mental activity. Even rest can become something to optimize. Sleep can become a target. Relaxation can become a task. Peace can become another achievement. But you do not need to achieve peace tonight. You can simply make less room for noise. The courtyard offers an older kind of simplicity. The fountain does not ask whether it is flowing efficiently. The stone does not worry about whether it is useful. The plants do not compare their growth with anything beyond themselves. They simply exist within the conditions that have arrived. Perhaps that is enough for you too. You have spent much of the day responding to circumstances. You have adjusted. You have decided. You have reacted. You have carried information from one moment into another. Now there can be a place where nothing follows you. The thought that was important earlier can become less important here. The problem that needed attention can remain outside the courtyard. The person whose opinion troubled you can remain somewhere else. Even your own expectations can wait beyond the wall. There is something deeply human about discovering that not every moment needs to contain progress. Ancient life had many periods when nothing seemed to happen. A person might sit beside a fountain, wait for someone, watch the light change, listen to the evening, remain still. Modern life often makes stillness feel suspicious. If nothing is happening, perhaps something should be happening. But the ancient courtyard does not agree. Nothing needs to happen. The water can continue. The leaves can remain still. The walls can hold the night, and you can rest among them. Perhaps this is what enoughness feels like. Not excitement, not achievement, not the satisfaction of having completed a long list. Just enough. Enough room, enough quiet, enough warmth, enough darkness, enough time. The mind may briefly object. It may say there is still something to think about. Let it say that. You do not have to answer. There may always be something else. There is always another detail, another possibility, another responsibility. If you wait until nothing remains, you will never find the moment of rest. So rest with something still unfinished. Let the unfinished thing exist without your supervision. The fountain does not stop because you have stopped paying attention. The night does not become less real because you are no longer studying it. Your life does not fall apart because you have closed your eyes for a while. There is a quiet trust in that. The world can carry itself for a few hours. You do not need to hold it together. Imagine now that the courtyard becomes even darker. The walls are no longer clearly defined. The plants are only soft shapes. The fountain is easier to hear than to see. The details are disappearing. This is not a loss. It is a relief. When fewer details are available, fewer things demand interpretation. The mind can become less interested in naming everything. You do not need to identify every sound. You do not need to follow every thought. You do not need to know exactly how relaxed you are. You can simply remain. The Stoic idea of living according to nature can feel very different here than it might during the busy hours of the day. Nature does not rush to complete itself. Night does not hurry toward morning. Water does not question the pace at which it moves. The courtyard does not wonder whether it is doing enough. Perhaps you can borrow that quietness for a little while. There is nothing to prove, nothing to optimize, nothing to finish. The city can sleep. The fountain can continue. The stone can cool beneath the night air. And you can become a little less interested in everything beyond this small circle of quiet. The courtyard does not ask you to stay awake and understand it. It only remains, and gradually you can remain too. The courtyard has become almost still. There is no need to leave it yet. The night outside can continue without you. The fountain makes its quiet sound. The stone holds the coolness of the evening. And somewhere beyond the walls, the city rests in its own darkness. For a little while, nothing more is required. That may be difficult to believe when you have spent the day surrounded by things that required something from you. Messages wanted answers. Tasks wanted completion. People wanted attention. Plans wanted decisions. Even your own thoughts may have demanded explanations. And when enough small demands gather together, the mind can begin to believe that it must remain available at all times. But you do not have to remain available tonight. There is a difference between being responsible and being permanently alert. The Romans knew responsibility. Their lives depended on countless duties, relationships, arrangements, and obligations. A household had to function. Work had to be done. Promises had to be kept. Decisions had consequences. Yet no human being could remain engaged with every responsibility every hour. Eventually, there had to be a boundary. The day ended, the doors closed. The lamps became fewer. A person withdrew from the public world and entered a smaller private one. You can do something similar now. The responsibilities have not vanished. They simply do not need your attention at this moment. Perhaps there is something you have been meaning to finish. Let it remain unfinished. Perhaps there is a message you have not answered. Let it wait. Perhaps there is a decision you promised yourself you would make. Let tomorrow receive it. Perhaps there is something you are afraid you will forget. You can trust that the important things will still be there when morning comes. The mind may insist that one more review is necessary. One more check, one more plan, one more imagined conversation. But there is no perfect amount of thinking that guarantees tomorrow will behave. At some point, thought stops being preparation and becomes repetition. You do not have to cross that boundary tonight. The ancient philosopher Epictetus often returned to the idea that our inner freedom depends on recognizing what actually belongs to us. Tonight, that idea can become very small. You do not need to manage the future. You do not need to manage other people's reactions. You do not need to manage every possible outcome. You only need to allow this moment to be what it is. A quiet moment. A resting moment. An incomplete moment. There is nothing wrong with an incomplete moment. In fact, most moments are incomplete while we are living them. A conversation ends before every feeling has been expressed. A day ends before every task is complete. A question remains open. A plan changes. Life continues without providing a neat conclusion at every turn. Perhaps peace is not the reward that arrives after everything is resolved. Perhaps peace sometimes comes when you stop requiring resolution before allowing yourself to rest. The thought can be very gentle. Nothing more tonight. Not because nothing matters, because you matter too. Your attention is not an endless resource. Your energy is not infinite. Your mind deserves hours in which it does not have to produce answers. Imagine the courtyard becoming quieter around you. The fountain is still there. The walls are still there. The plants are still there. But you no longer need to look closely. You can simply know they are present. In the same way, your responsibilities can remain present somewhere beyond your awareness. You do not have to examine them. They can exist without being actively remembered. There may be an email waiting. There may be a conversation waiting. There may be work waiting. There may be an uncertain future waiting. Let them wait. The world has waited before. It will wait again. The Romans did not have the modern ability to reach everyone instantly. A person could disappear behind a closed door and become temporarily unreachable. There is something peaceful about that boundary. For a few hours, no one can ask anything of you. No new information has to enter. No new decision has to be made. No new opinion has to be processed. The night can remain quiet, and perhaps your mind can begin to discover that silence does not mean something has gone wrong. Silence simply means nothing is being demanded. You may notice thoughts arriving anyway. That is fine. You do not need to make them disappear. A thought about tomorrow can pass through. A memory can appear. A concern can briefly return. There is no need to chase it away. You can let it remain unanswered. The mind does not have to become perfectly empty for you to rest. It only needs to become less involved, less interested, less responsible for everything. The fountain continues. Its sound does not ask whether you have completed the day correctly. The stone does not care whether you made the right decision. The darkness does not ask what you accomplished. Nothing around you is keeping score. You can stop keeping score too. There is no final evaluation waiting at the edge of sleep. You do not need to decide whether today was good enough. It was today. It happened. Now it is becoming yesterday. That is enough. The imagined Roman courtyard feels farther away now. The boundaries of the walls are softer. The details are less important. There is no story to follow, no problem to solve, no destination to reach. Only the quiet recognition that some things can remain undone without becoming dangerous. Some questions can remain open without becoming emergencies. Some uncertainty can remain uncertain, and you can still be at peace. The night has made room for that. So let tomorrow keep its responsibilities. Let the morning bring its own questions. Let the unfinished things remain where they are. For now, nothing more is required. The night has become quieter than the thoughts that brought you here. There is still a world beyond the walls. There are still streets, homes, distant lives, and countless things unfolding without your knowledge. But they have become less relevant for a little while. The moment in front of you is very small, and perhaps that is exactly why it feels peaceful. There is no need to enlarge it, no need to turn it into a lesson, no need to ask what it means. It can simply be a quiet moment. Ancient people knew how to spend time inside moments that had no obvious purpose. A person might sit beside water, wait beneath a shaded wall, watch an evening settle over a courtyard, listen to distant sounds becoming fewer. Nothing extraordinary had to happen. The moment did not have to become memorable. It only had to be lived. Modern life can make this difficult because so much of our attention is directed toward what comes next. The next message, the next task, the next meal, the next appointment, the next goal, the next problem. Even when nothing is happening, the mind can stand at the edge of the future, waiting. But tonight, there is nowhere you need to arrive. You can remain where you are. Perhaps there is a simple sensation beneath all the thinking. The weight of the body resting. The quiet temperature of the room. The faint sound of something moving outside. The feeling of darkness around you. You do not need to concentrate on these things. They can simply be there, and you can simply be here. This is different from trying to meditate perfectly. There is no test, no score, no correct state of mind. If thoughts appear, they can appear. If they become quiet, they can become quiet. If your attention wanders, it can wander. Nothing has gone wrong. The ancient Stoic ideal of living according to nature does not need to become complicated here. Nature does not demand that every moment justify itself. A tree does not need to explain its stillness. Water does not need to prove that it is moving efficiently. Night does not need to demonstrate that it is useful. It simply unfolds. Perhaps you can let your own experience unfold in the same uncomplicated way. You may be tired. You may still have thoughts. You may still carry a little tension from the day. None of this disqualifies you from rest. Rest does not require perfection. It only requires permission. and permission can be quiet. You can stop asking yourself whether you are relaxed enough. You can stop checking whether sleep is coming. You can stop wondering whether your mind is becoming quiet quickly enough. Those questions only add another layer of attention. There is no need to measure the night. Let it take its own pace. Imagine that the ancient courtyard is almost completely dark now. You can still hear the fountain, but the shape of the water is difficult to see. The walls have become shadows. The plants are only soft outlines. There is less to look at. And with less to look at, there is less to think about. The mind does not need a constant supply of objects. It can become quiet when there is nothing demanding its judgment. This may be one of the simplest forms of philosophical rest. Not finding an answer, not reaching a conclusion, simply allowing the present moment to remain unfinished. A person might spend an entire lifetime waiting for conditions to become perfect. Perfect health, perfect relationships, perfect certainty, perfect confidence, perfect timing, but perfect conditions rarely arrive. There is always something slightly unresolved. And yet, ordinary life still contains moments of peace. A quiet meal, a cool evening, a familiar room, a few minutes beside an open window, the sound of rain somewhere beyond the walls, a body becoming tired at the end of a long day. These moments do not solve life. They do not need to. They are valuable because, for a short while, nothing needs solving. Perhaps that is what the present moment offers you now. Not a solution. A pause in the demand for solutions. You can leave the larger questions untouched. You can allow your future self to meet them when the time comes. Tonight, you are not required to become wiser. You are not required to become stronger. You are not required to become more disciplined. You do not have to transform anything. You can simply be tired. There is no shame in that. A tired mind has carried enough. Let it become less precise. Let the details of the day lose their sharp edges. The conversation from earlier does not need to be reconstructed. The unfinished task does not need another mental inspection. The distant future does not need another prediction. The present can remain small. The room, the quiet, the darkness, the soft awareness that you are here. That is enough. And perhaps even that list is more than you need. The fewer things you have to hold, the easier it becomes to rest. So you can let the ancient courtyard become less distinct. The fountain does not need to be imagined perfectly. The walls do not need to have a particular color. The night does not need to look a certain way. The scene can simply soften. You can be somewhere quiet without knowing exactly where. You can rest without knowing exactly how. You can drift without deciding where the drifting leads. There is no destination tonight. There is only this gradual reduction of effort. Less effort to understand. Less effort to remember. Less effort to anticipate. Less effort to control. And somewhere inside that simplicity, the present moment becomes enough. Not because everything is complete, because, for now, nothing more needs to be added. There is a quiet freedom in not knowing. Not the kind of uncertainty that demands an answer, but the softer kind that simply belongs to being alive. The next hour has not happened. Tomorrow has not opened. The days beyond tomorrow are even farther away, resting somewhere outside the reach of the present moment. You do not need to bring them closer tonight. In ancient Rome, uncertainty was woven into ordinary life. A traveler could not know exactly what awaited beyond the next stretch of road. A household could not predict every change in weather, health, harvest, trade, or fortune. Messages traveled at the speed of people and animals. News could arrive late, incomplete, or not at all. There was no way to refresh the future. Perhaps that sounds inconvenient. Perhaps it was also peaceful in a way modern life rarely allows. Today, information can arrive almost instantly. You can search, check, compare, predict, monitor, calculate, and look again. When something is uncertain, there always seems to be another piece of information you could find, and sometimes information is useful. But there is a point where more information does not create certainty. It only gives uncertainty more details to occupy. The mind can become very skilled at preparing for things that have not happened. What if this happens? What if that changes? What if someone reacts badly? What if the plan fails? What if something unexpected appears? The possibilities multiply, yet none of them has happened. Tonight, you do not need to visit every possible future. Let the future remain larger than your imagination. There is something deeply restful about accepting that you do not know. A Roman standing near the edge of the city could look down a road and know only that it continued beyond what he could see. He could prepare what preparation required. He could carry what he needed. He could choose a direction, but he could not know every mile before walking it. Perhaps that is enough. You do not need to know every mile of your own life either. You only need to arrive at the next morning when it comes, and morning will come without needing your supervision. This is where ancient wisdom becomes very gentle. It does not promise that uncertainty will disappear. It suggests that a person can become less frightened by the existence of uncertainty. You can live without knowing everything you already do. Every day contains countless things you do not know. You simply do not think about most of them. There are people you will never meet, events happening far away, conversations occurring without you, decisions being made by people you have never heard of, changes taking place beyond your awareness. You remain safe without monitoring them. The mind only becomes restless when it decides that one particular uncertainty must be solved immediately. But perhaps it does not. Perhaps the question can remain unanswered until daylight. Perhaps it can remain unanswered longer. There is no rule saying every uncertainty must become a conclusion. Imagine the ancient courtyard again, although even that image is beginning to soften. The fountain is somewhere in the darkness. The stone walls are quiet. There is no need to see them clearly. Beyond the walls, the city is sleeping. No one knows exactly what tomorrow will bring, and somehow the city can still sleep. A mother can close her eyes without knowing how the morning will unfold. A worker can rest without knowing whether tomorrow's work will be easy. A traveler can sleep before continuing the road. The human heart has always had to rest before certainty arrived. Perhaps you can too. There may be something in your life that you want to know very badly. You may want to know how a conversation will turn out, whether a plan will succeed, whether someone will stay, whether an opportunity will appear, whether a difficult period will end soon. These questions can matter deeply, but they do not have to be answered in the dark. You can care about tomorrow without living inside it tonight. That is an important difference. You do not have to become indifferent. You simply do not need to become occupied. The future can be important and still remain elsewhere. Let it remain elsewhere. The mind may try to pull it closer. It may create scenes, predict reactions, build explanations, imagine conversations, prepare responses, but you do not have to follow. The imagined future is not asking anything from you. It has not arrived. You are here, and here is much quieter. Perhaps there is a little relief in realizing that uncertainty is not evidence that something is wrong. Sometimes uncertainty simply means that time has not finished unfolding. The answer may exist somewhere ahead. You do not need to drag it backward into tonight. The ancient world could not offer people instant certainty, yet people still slept beneath roofs, beneath open skies, beside roads, in crowded homes, in quiet rooms. They trusted the next day to arrive before they knew what it contained. There is a similar trust available to you, not blind confidence that everything will go exactly as you hope. Just enough trust to say, I will meet tomorrow when tomorrow becomes today. That is all. You do not need to solve the future tonight. You do not need to rehearse every possibility. You do not need to know how every story ends. Some stories are allowed to continue without you reading ahead. And as the night grows quieter, even that thought can become unnecessary. No future, no prediction, no preparation. Only the present moment, becoming softer. The uncertainty remains, but it no longer needs to be held. It can wait somewhere beyond the darkness, and you can rest here without knowing what comes next. The ancient city is nearly quiet now, not perfectly quiet. A city is never perfectly quiet. Somewhere, a door settles against its frame. Somewhere, a distant footstep touches stone and then disappears. Somewhere, water continues moving through a channel that nobody is watching. But the sounds are no longer asking for your attention. They can simply exist. The Roman streets that seemed so important earlier have become distant shapes. The businesses are closed. The conversations have ended. The people who spent the day rushing from one obligation to another have gradually withdrawn into their homes, and none of them needed to finish everything before night arrived. That may be worth remembering. The city did not wait for every task to be completed. It did not require every argument to be settled. It did not demand that every person understand exactly what had happened during the day. Night simply came, and perhaps your own life can be allowed to do the same. There may still be unfinished work somewhere. There may be messages you have not answered. There may be decisions you have not made. There may be questions you have carried for longer than you expected. But the world has a strange ability to continue while those things remain unresolved. You have seen this before. A task waits until morning. A conversation pauses. A decision becomes tomorrow's decision. A problem that seemed urgent at 1 hour becomes less urgent after sleep. Nothing magical has happened. Time has simply created distance, and distance can be gentle. Imagine walking through Rome now, although the street is almost too dark to see. You no longer notice individual buildings. You do not need to know who lives behind each doorway. There are thousands of private lives here, thousands of thoughts, thousands of concerns, thousands of unfinished stories, and yet the city sleeps. A person who was worried about money is sleeping. A person who was embarrassed by something they said is sleeping. A person who does not know what tomorrow will bring is sleeping. A person who made a mistake is sleeping. A person who has not solved their life is sleeping. The city does not require certainty before allowing its people to rest. Perhaps neither should you. There is something comforting about imagining all those separate rooms becoming dark one by one. Not because every person has found an answer. Most probably have not. They have simply become tired enough to stop asking. And sometimes that is all rest requires. You do not need to reach a final understanding of your life tonight. You do not need to know whether every choice was correct. You do not need to decide what the future means. You can let the unanswered parts remain unanswered. They are not emergencies merely because you can still think about them. The mind sometimes confuses awareness with responsibility. If you know about a problem, it feels as though you should be doing something about it. But knowing and acting are not always the same. There are moments when the appropriate response is simply to wait. Sleep can be one of those moments. The Roman streets are becoming even less distinct. The fountain you imagined earlier is now only a faint sound. Perhaps you cannot picture the stone walls anymore. That is fine. You do not need to maintain the image. You do not need to remember where you are. The setting can dissolve. The philosophy can dissolve with it. The important thing has already become simple. You are not required to supervise everything. The world does not need your constant attention. There is a life beyond your awareness, and it continues perfectly well without your thoughts directing it. This can feel strangely liberating. Think of all the things you normally monitor: messages, schedules, news, opinions, plans, possibilities, small changes in other people's moods, small changes in your own mood. So much information can pass through a modern mind in one day, but none of it needs to accompany you into sleep. The ancient city had fewer ways to reach across distance. When a door closed, a person became less available. When night fell, visibility became limited. When someone went home, you often simply did not know what they were doing anymore. There was a natural separation between one person's life and another's. Perhaps you can borrow that separation now. Your mind can close its door, not forever, only for the night. Whatever is happening elsewhere can remain elsewhere. You do not need to know. You do not need to check. You do not need to imagine. The world can be wonderfully large without requiring you to keep track of it. And perhaps this is another quiet form of Stoic freedom. You recognize that your attention is finite, so you stop giving it away to everything. Not with anger, not with fear, just with quietness. The city continues without you. The night continues without you. Time continues without you. And that is not a threat. It is a relief. You do not have to keep everything moving. You do not have to hold every relationship together through constant thought. You do not have to make tomorrow safe by worrying about it tonight. You can allow the world to remain imperfect while you rest. The streets are almost empty now. A final light glows somewhere behind a window. Then another becomes dim. The city does not announce that it is going to sleep. It simply becomes quieter. Perhaps you can become quieter in the same way. Not through effort, not by forcing anything away, just by becoming less interested in the noise. A thought arrives, then it becomes less important. Another thought arrives, then it becomes less important too. Nothing needs to be pushed away. Nothing needs to be solved. The night can hold it all at a distance. You are here. The city is elsewhere. Tomorrow is farther still. And for now, there is only this small space of rest between one day and the next. The ancient world has almost disappeared. There is no need to bring it back. Let the streets fade. Let the distant sounds fade. Let the questions fade. Let the need to know fade. The world will still be here when morning comes. It does not need you to stay awake and watch over it. You can close the door on the day and let the city sleep without your permission. There is less to remember now. The Roman streets have almost disappeared. The old courtyard is no longer important. The fountain is somewhere in the distance, if it is there at all. Even the shape of the ancient city can be allowed to soften until it becomes only a quiet feeling. You do not need to hold the scene together. You do not need to keep listening carefully. There is nothing hidden that you might miss. The mind has been carrying many things for a long time. Names, plans, faces, conversations, expectations, small disappointments, large questions, things you wanted to happen, things you hoped would not happen, things you still do not understand. For much of the day, carrying these things may have felt necessary. But necessity has a time and a place. Night is different. Night can be the place where some of those things become less precise. You do not need to remember every detail of the day. You do not need to preserve every thought. Some memories can become faint without losing their meaning. Some concerns can become quiet without being forgotten. Some questions can remain unanswered without becoming more dangerous. The mind is allowed to loosen its grip. Perhaps there is still one thought returning again and again. Let it return. You do not have to chase it away. You do not have to understand why it keeps appearing. You do not have to decide whether it is important. A thought can simply be a thought. It can pass through the quiet room without becoming an assignment. And if another thought comes, that is fine too. There is room for it. There is no need to arrange them. No need to sort them into useful and useless. No need to make the mind perfectly organized before sleep. The desire to organize everything can itself become tiring. So perhaps nothing needs organizing now. The day can remain messy. The past can remain complicated. The future can remain unknown. You can remain unfinished. There is something very soft about that. An ancient person lying down at night would not have known everything about the next morning. They would not have known every event that would occur, every conversation that would take place, every change that might come. They slept anyway, not because they possessed certainty, because the body eventually asked for rest. And perhaps your body is making the same quiet request now. There is no need to answer with words. You can simply stop asking so much of yourself. The philosophy that once seemed like a set of ideas has become much smaller now. Control what is yours. Release what is not. Accept what has happened. Allow tomorrow to remain tomorrow. You do not need to repeat these thoughts. You do not need to remember them. Even philosophy can be put down. It has done enough for tonight. The ancient city has done enough to... You have walked through its streets. You have imagined its rooms. You have listened to its distant sounds. Now it can disappear. You do not need another image. You do not need another lesson. There can simply be darkness, not an empty darkness, a gentle darkness. The kind that removes details, the kind that asks less of the eyes, less of the mind, less of the memory. There is nothing you need to see clearly now. Nothing you need to understand clearly. Even the words you are hearing can become less important. You do not need to remember them tomorrow. They do not need to stay with you. Let them become quieter as you listen. Perhaps the spaces between the thoughts are becoming a little larger. There is no need to make those spaces larger. They can happen naturally. You may notice a sound, then not notice it. You may notice a thought, then lose interest in it. You may remember something, then forget what you were remembering. This is not failure. It is simply the mind becoming tired. And tiredness can be gentle. You have spent enough time being alert, enough time interpreting, enough time responding, enough time deciding. There can be fewer decisions now. You do not have to choose what to think about. You do not have to choose what happens next. There is no next thing you need to prepare for. There is only the quiet. The quiet does not require your attention. It simply surrounds you. Somewhere beyond it, tomorrow is waiting. But tomorrow does not need to be imagined. It will arrive when it arrives. The people in your life will continue being themselves. The unfinished work will remain where you left it. The questions will wait. The world will continue. And you can become less involved with it for a while, not detached from life forever, just distant enough to rest. There is a difference. You are not leaving anything behind. You are simply no longer carrying it in your hands. The things that matter can remain safe without your constant thought. The things that do not matter can become even quieter, and the things you cannot change can remain outside your reach, where they have always belonged. The mind is becoming simpler, less language, less explanation, less memory, less anticipation, less effort. There is nothing wrong with having less. Less can be peaceful. Less can be enough. The night is becoming very soft now. There is no ancient Rome to visit, no philosophy to understand, no problem to solve, only rest. And even rest does not need to be performed. You can simply stop. Let the day become distant. Let the thoughts become faint. Let the details become unimportant. Let yourself become quiet without trying to become quiet. There is nothing left to carry for this moment. Nothing that needs your hands. Nothing that needs your answer. Nothing that needs to be solved before morning. You can put it all down and remain. There is almost nothing left to explain now. The ancient city has become distant. The streets are quiet. The old stone walls are somewhere far beyond attention. The fountain has become only a faint impression, and even that impression can disappear. You do not need to hold onto the story. You do not need to remember where the journey began. You do not need to know where it ends. There is no ending that needs to arrive. There is only the quiet. And the quiet has been here longer than any city. Long before Rome placed its stones beneath the feet of its people, there were nights. Long before philosophers searched for words to describe peace, there were tired human beings lying down in darkness. Long before anyone gave names to acceptance, uncertainty, control, or freedom, the world already knew how to become still. Night came. People rested. Morning waited. And life continued. Perhaps there is something comforting in knowing that you belong to this very old rhythm. You do not have to understand it. You do not have to control it. You only have to let yourself be part of it. The day has become far away now. Its conversations are no longer clear. Its concerns have lost their edges. The things that seemed urgent have become quieter. The things that seemed important can remain important without being thought about. You do not need to keep reminding yourself of them. They will still exist. They can wait, and you can rest. There may still be thoughts moving gently through your mind. That is all right. They do not need to disappear. They can become softer, less complete, less interesting. A thought may begin and then lose its ending. A memory may appear and then become difficult to hold. A word may arrive and then fade before another word replaces it. Nothing needs to be followed. Nothing needs to be understood. The mind can become spacious without being empty. And gradually, even spaciousness can become unnecessary. There is no need to notice how sleepy you are. No need to wonder whether sleep has arrived. No need to check the time. Time can continue without being counted. The night can continue without being measured. You can simply be here. Or perhaps you are already less aware of being here. That is fine. There is nothing to maintain, nothing to protect, nothing to accomplish. The old Stoic idea of acceptance has become almost silent now. You do not need to think about accepting anything. You can simply stop resisting the moment you are in. The moment is already here. It does not need your approval. It does not need your explanation. It only asks to pass, and it will pass. Everything passes, the difficult hours, the busy days, the conversations, the worries, the plans, the seasons, the cities. Even the great Roman world, which once seemed permanent, became part of history. Its walls changed. Its people disappeared. Its voices became distant. Its roads became quiet. And yet the night remained. There is something peaceful about that scale of time. Your worries may feel enormous when they are close. From farther away, they become smaller. You do not need to force yourself to gain perspective. You can simply rest long enough for perspective to return naturally. For now, the world can become very small. The room, the darkness, the softness beneath you. Perhaps a distant sound. Perhaps no sound at all. That is enough. Nothing more needs to be added. You are not behind. You are not late. You are not required to understand your entire life before sleeping. You are simply tired, and being tired is allowed. Rest is allowed. Not knowing is allowed. Being unfinished is allowed. The future can wait. The past can remain where it is. Other people can continue living their own lives. The world can continue turning. You do not need to turn with it consciously. You can let yourself become still. There is no need to make stillness happen. It can arrive on its own. The way night arrives. The way darkness fills a quiet room. The way awareness becomes softer when the body no longer needs to remain alert. Perhaps you are no longer following every sentence. Perhaps the words are becoming distant. That is all right. You do not need to remember them. They can pass through the quiet and leave nothing behind. No lesson, no task, no conclusion. Only the feeling that, for a little while, nothing is required. Nothing is waiting for your answer. Nothing is asking you to perform. Nothing is asking you to become someone else. You can simply rest as you are. The ancient city is gone now. There is no road. No courtyard, no fontaine, no emperor, no philosophy, only darkness, soft darkness, quiet darkness, and within it, less and less to hold, less thought, less effort, less distance between you and rest. Perhaps even the idea of rest can disappear. There is no need to name what is happening. Let it happen. The world will wait. Morning will come when it comes. The unfinished things will still be unfinished if they need to be. You can meet them later. Not now. Now there is nothing to solve, nothing to prove, nothing to carry. The night is enough. The quiet is enough. You are allowed to let go of the day. You are allowed to lose track of time. You are allowed to drift beyond the words. And if sleep is already coming, there is no need to resist it. Let awareness become lighter. Let the room become softer. Let the remaining thoughts become faint. There is no destination, no final lesson, no need to arrive anywhere. Only a gentle fading, a quiet space, a little less and a little less, until even these words are no longer necessary. Until there is only rest,